Okay, so now everything from now on is definitely recorded. Okay, so it's 2 o'clock sharp, at least in Amsterdam or in Groningen, where I'm located. I know the times differs for the participants. Welcome, everyone. It's really nice to see so many people here. For the ones that join a bit later, my name is Agnieszka Postepska, and I'm in place of Viola Angelini, who had to travel today to Italy, so she could not host the seminars. So I hope that I will represent her well. Today we have Daphne Nicolitsas from University of Crete. Daphne has done a lot of work on wage determination, wage differentials, price settings, and also female labor market participation. But today she will talk about life satisfaction and fairness. Very intrigued, and I'm curious what we will learn today about life satisfaction. So Daphne, the floor is yours. We have 60 minutes. We'll take questions during the talk, so please jump in whenever we would like to ask a question. I will also monitor the chat, so in case questions pop up in the chats, I will interrupt and ask them. Okay.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Agnieszka. Thanks to Matlub and Viola for organizing these seminars. I have enjoyed them so far very much. And thank you all for being here. Now, as Agnieszka already told you, I'm going to be talking about fairness, expectations, and life satisfaction, and the impact one has on the other, or the mechanisms through which one impacts on the other. So let me share my screen. I assume you can now see my slides. I hope so. So fairness and life satisfaction, I look at the mechanisms behind the impact of one on the other. I hope you don't raise your expectations too high because I might not be able to meet them. But the motivation for me for doing this work was, well, some general observation from everyday life, and unfortunately, I must say, everyday life in Greece, where I think fairness and justice are not exactly being served, and people are dissatisfied with their lives. So going beyond the general statement that institutions matter for life satisfaction, which has been researched, and the general verdict is that institutions matter, some matter more than others. I wanted to look at whether justice itself can impact life satisfaction. And work has been done on the impact of distributive justice, but less work has been done on the matter of procedural justice. And the main question I wanted to answer was whether individuals are more satisfied with their lives when they have little reason to question that they will be treated fairly. So it's not necessarily whether you have been treated fairly so far or whether you have been treated unfairly so far, but whether you think that in general you will be treated fairly. There are chances that you will be treated fairly. So is this an issue that concerns businesses and individuals? It looks as if it is. There was a relatively recent Financial Times article by Isabel Berwick in April 2023, where she reported on the work of somebody called Josh Bersin, who is the head of a US human capital consultancy. And he concluded from his research that trust is the number one driver of satisfaction of employees, that if individuals feel they are fairly treated, then they trust the organization they work for, they trust the management, and they trust their peers. On the other hand, if pay is unfair, then growth, development, and other benefits are also unfair. I was wondering whether the above impact of unfairness in pay on job satisfaction can extend beyond work. So the question was, if individuals believe they are likely to be treated unfairly in and out of work, does this reinforce any assessment of inappropriate treatment at work? My gut feeling was that it is, but it remains to be supported by some evidence. So some people told me when I started working on this that well, justice or legal matters are not important for all of us. How often do you go to court? But the issue is that legal matters do arise in many aspects of our lives, whether it is in employment, whether as an employee, whether it is in business, or whether it is in our personal life. And my feeling is that even if we have no direct involvement with judicial procedures, we like to think that if we needed to go to court, if we needed legal services, then we could expect an efficient and fair treatment. And we also like to think that other people who have addressed themselves to the courts, to the justice system, have been treated fairly and efficiently. So these are very difficult concepts, and I suppose they're more difficult for me, at least, as an economist who is not very familiar with these terms. Well, the definition is one thing, so I'll just go ahead and tell you what I think procedural and distributive justice is, and then I'll show you what I've decided to proxy them by, which is certainly the most difficult part. So when we talk about procedural justice, what we have in mind is how fair the rules and processes are. So are courts impartial would be one facet of procedural justice. Distributive justice, on the other hand, looks at how fair the outcomes are. Is pay commensurate to the effort that people put in? Does it address their expectations, or does it meet their expectations? Now, is procedural justice important? It seems that the literature on the sociology, psychology, legal literature seems to think it is. And the reason for which procedural justice is important is that if fair and impartial rules for determining justice do not exist, fair decisions cannot be made. Now, what I wanted to test, after thinking a lot about all of these concepts, are four hypotheses, which are presented in these slides, on this slide, and I will go through them. The first hypothesis is that if people have a more positive perception of procedural justice, this will be associated with a higher level of life satisfaction. Why is that? Because if individuals believe that courts administer justice fairly, then they might have more confidence that if they have a legal matter that they have to go to court with, they will also receive fair treatment. Now, this hypothesis might seem innocuous, but it does involve at least two assumptions in it. First of all, that fairness leads to higher life satisfaction. And secondly, and more importantly perhaps, and more difficult, that procedural justice can be used as a proxy of fairness. Now, as far as the first assumption goes, there have been some experiments in economics which have shown that fairness is associated with higher life satisfaction. In other sciences, including medical science, the signs people look for is that fairness can have physical signs, and there is evidence to that effect. Now, one can disagree with this hypothesis for various reasons. I will mention three that could lead people to disagree with it. The first has to do with the fact that there are other aspects of life of life that could be associated with fairness much more than procedural justice. And I would not disagree with that. Surely there are other aspects, for example, whether and the tax system is fair or there is corruption, etc., etc. But I have no data on that. The second reason one could object is that even if we find a positive association between procedural justice and life satisfaction, we cannot say anything about causality. And this is a usual issue we have especially with cross-sectional data. Now, the only thing I can say to this effect is that there is some evidence from other researchers, not from myself, who use objective measures of justice and have found an association with life satisfaction. And a third objection, which is somewhat related to the other two, is that justice and life satisfaction are themselves the outcome of development. So richer countries can have better justice systems and can have higher life satisfaction. Yeah, but in this case, we would require some way to identify, what is the cause and the effect, and unfortunately, I cannot do this. Now, the second hypothesis is that the perception of being appropriately paid, so now we go on to distributive justice, is associated with higher life satisfaction. Again, here we have, okay, I must say here, I will diverge somewhat and just say that distributive justice here will be proxied in two ways. The first will be a self-assessed measure of distributive justice. So do you think you have been paid fairly? The second measure is more objective. So I will construct some gap measure between what your income is and what your income should have been, taking account of your productive characteristics. So I'm hoping that this second measure can somewhat alleviate the issue of reverse causality. Now, the third hypothesis is that procedural injustice is associated with life satisfaction, also in an indirect way, via fairness perceptions. So, if you believe that there is not much fairness, then this should impact both through a direct way, but also through an indirect way, because it will amplify other injustices that you observe. And finally, disappointment with pay is more strongly associated with lower life satisfaction when procedural justice is perceived as weak. So let me go ahead and tell you what I do to test these hypotheses. Now, the data I use are from the European Social Survey, and they are from round 5 of the survey, which was conducted in 2011. Milena has a question.
Yes, it's actually on the previous slide. Sorry to interrupt. Just a clarification question. So here, the first mechanism from procedural justice to life satisfaction is, let's say, for society at large, right? So even if I don't go to court every day, still I know that the court system is working, everyone is getting fair trial. But then the other three hypotheses are actually limited to people who work specifically. But
Yeah.
why is that? So I see that as a bit of a conceptual, disconnect. Could you clarify? In the sense that one is general and one is only for working people.
You're right, and it does seem that I mean I'm not sure they are disconnected. They're different, but not everybody works. So I also have to look at whether this feeling that procedural justice affects life satisfaction also works directly rather than just through work. I have tested it both for working in the working population and for all individuals. But I do see what you're saying. But how could one remedy this? I think
If I may add something, so perhaps it
yeah.
would be nice to have some sort of explanation of how working itself can affect life satisfaction and how we should think about that in light of this hypothesis. So yeah, you cannot do anything about it. Of course, if you want to look at pay, you have to look at working people. But just so that there is some clarification on how the working itself affect life satisfaction or the relationship between life satisfaction and procedural justice, that would already, I think, be helpful in thinking about these hypotheses.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I agree, Agnieszka. Perhaps perhaps when you're working, you have more opportunities to feel the injustice. But also, I would not decide on whether to work or not work if I think society is unfair. But perhaps the fact that I don't have a job could be a result of unfairness. I think it gets very complicated. I can see there are two hands, Klaus and Milena, so perhaps perhaps they could assist me.
Just a quick remark, but even for those people who are working, I mean, there's more than just payment. I mean, the meaningful work, and I think Milena will also think maybe about these lines may matter for many people also. I mean, so if you focus on just payment, that may be too little narrow economic thinking. Am I right on this? I'm not sure. So work is much more than just payment. And being satisfied, I mean, some people are paid by not by money, but often payment schemes in companies are very similar. Also, the yes, performance is different, and people may be compensated differently or are being unhappy because payment is equal.
Sure. But when I test for, we'll see, we'll look at the results and the procedure I use to test the hypothesis. I don't only take the pay aspect. I also use the judicial aspect in the regressions, if that's of any comfort. Milena? No, you don't have another question. It was from your hand
No,
was.
yeah, no, it was me. I'm not sure this is very helpful, but it's in along the lines of what Aga was just saying. So the first step of so essentially those who work and how is work itself related to life satisfaction. I think that would be helpful. And here it could be helpful to think of the self-employed, for example, right? So they have the highest work satisfaction, often life satisfaction of any other group, despite low pay. And this connects to what Klaus was talking about, because they derive these non-monetary benefits from working, like having a purpose, meaningfulness, being your own boss, autonomy, those sorts of things. So just think, and maybe that can also help you to connect the levels at which the hypotheses are formulated for the working and non-working.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yes, that is very helpful. And I have to say, since the issue arose, that I'm only looking at employees. Well, maybe that makes matters worse, but but I should clarify this. Okay. Now, the sample is 14 high-income European countries, the 12 original EU members, plus Switzerland and Norway. Why restrict yourself to high-income European countries? Because I think institutions are so very different if at different income levels. And perhaps the variation in the institutions would give you more explanatory power. But I'd like to look at along or between countries that have a similar development level, what is going on. The outcome variable is self-reported life satisfaction. We all know this is scaled on a 0 to 10 scale in the European Social Survey. And it looks like this. Okay. So you have most of the mass at the higher levels of satisfaction. Now, regarding the other variables, which we know less about, the procedural justice variable is proxied by individuals' assessment of how well courts operate in their country. And there are four actually variables that measure that. Whether courts are partial, whether courts do a very good or a very bad job, whether courts make mistakes, whether courts are under political pressure. The answers are given again on a scale which is not always as detailed. So courts are partial goes from 0 to 10. Courts do a very good or a very bad job, which is very general. Statement goes from 1 to 5, etc., etc. Okay. Now, in the results, you won't see because I won't present all of them, but I have repeated the results I'll show you for all variables. The one that performs worse is the courts make mistakes. The other proxies work similarly. Okay, now, so on the distributive justice proxies, I already mentioned we have this objective measure of whether pay is appropriate given effort. And there is a scale that individuals reply to. And if I remember correctly, it goes from 0 to 5. Now, there's an objective measure too, which I've estimated myself, which is a wage gap, the actual minus the expected pay, as predicted from a Mincer regression. In all the regressions I'll show to you, there are controls for age, gender, marital status, children, education, health, social activity, household income adequacy, and country dummies. Now, in terms of the wage gap, this has been estimated by Mincer regressions by country. So the specification is somewhat different by each country. Yeah, that's one. Okay. Now, what do these procedure justice proxies look like? These are the distributions. So despite the fact that on the extremes you don't have that much mass, there is some mass on if you look at cumulatively above 6, say for example on how often courts make partial decisions. I have constructed all variables, or I've changed the direction of the variables so that the higher the level, the worse the procedural justice. So the
Daphne,
specification is
sorry,
very...
there's a question.
yeah, sorry, no.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for the presentation. Just clarification question. In the previous slide, when you showed us, what about the sample size? Because for me, for example, how often courts make partial decisions, it really depends on the past experiences. If they didn't experience, for example, something in the court, maybe they don't have any idea. So that's why I'm wondering whether it's really representative or not for the country.
Yeah, you're right. Everybody answers a question. So it's not you're not asked the question only if you have had some dealing with a court. What is your perception of what you think courts do?
But
So
it's like
then you're right.
No idea doesn't exist in replies.
No, it doesn't exist. You have to have an opinion. But you're right that if we could discriminate between those who have had a contact with courts, that would have been better. Okay, so the specification is very simple, or less, given the dependent variable takes values from 0 to 10, so you have an 11-point scale. This is what is being done fairly standardly in this kind of literature. So let me just summarize some points and then show you the results. So the results do show that the more individuals believe courts are impartial, the higher is life satisfaction, or reversely, individuals who believe courts are partial report a lower life satisfaction. And let's look at the results. Now, unfortunately, just for the purposes of presenting, I have cut out the columns which have the whole population rather than just those working. But what I've done is I've used the whole population, used this variable amongst others, whether courts make impartial decisions, and then repeated the regression just for employees. And then I add onto that the variables that are related to pay. Now, as you can see, the more negative the view on how whether courts are good, let's say that, because then it becomes too confusing. Whether courts are good, the less is life satisfaction, and this shows up in all three columns here. Now the change in the specification comes down here, where you add different variables. Now, so to the first column, I've added the variable on whether pay is appropriate. And this shows that if you strongly agree with this view, then your life satisfaction is higher. And to sort of get it to a more objective measure, I use this wage gap variable, which takes the expected sign. And if you break down those who have a positive wage gap and interact with a 1-0 dummy, and those who have a negative wage gap, you see that the negative wage gap causes more dissatisfaction than a positive wage gap. Now,
Daphne,
just to
sorry,
summarize,
another question.
yeah.
Sorry, do you have any fixed effects especially for the areas, for example, country fixed effects or
Yes,
not?
the country dummies in. There are lots of controls in here, which I mentioned before: age, marital status, sex, education, etc. Yeah. Now, in terms of distributive justice, so the second hypothesis, those disagreeing that pay is appropriate have significantly lower life satisfaction. if we use the objective measure, we find that a positive wage gap leads to higher life satisfaction. If you have a negative wage gap, then you have lower life satisfaction, and this is more, this is a stronger result than the high life satisfaction. Now, let me go ahead with the third and the fourth hypotheses, which are a little bit more complicated in a way. So the idea is the following. Do you think that if you believe that procedural justice is bad, this would make the impact of a dissatisfaction with pay stronger? And the way I've tested this is to introduce the partiality dummy in partiality scale in a linear fashion in the regression, and interact the positive wage gap with this variable and the negative wage gap with this variable. Now, as you can see, the partiality takes on the correct sign and is sort of marginally significant. The interaction of the wage gap with the partiality variable is only significant for the negative wage gap at a very low level. Yeah. So the negative wage, if you have a negative wage gap, the more impartial you think courts are, the more dissatisfied you are. Another way to look at that is to, instead of using the partiality dummy, the partiality variable, sorry, in a linear fashion, to construct a dummy which takes the value 1 if your dissatisfaction is higher than 3. So you have replied that courts are partial. You reply with the 3 up to 10. And you see that in that case, there is a strong negative impact from the interaction of the partiality with a negative wage dummy. And an alternative way, which is shown in the second column, is to look at whether, when you interact, rather, the negative wage gap with a dummy variable which takes the value 1 if your evaluation of the partiality of courts is higher than the median for the country. Then again, you find that there is a strong negative impact from the interaction of the wage gap with the partiality for the court's assessment. Now, in this regression, what I tried to see is whether there is an association between how appropriate you think pay is and your view on court operation by regressing this subjective measure of how appropriate you think your pay is on how often you think courts make partial decisions. And here you see that there is a positive correlation which goes in the right direction. So when you think courts are partial, then you think that your pay is not appropriate. And here I also control for this variable which measures whether you think that your wage does depend on the effort you put in the job. Despite having this variable in, you still find this positive coefficient on the first variable. I think I have no more results to present. So let me just summarize. So, the perceptions of justice, whether this is procedural or distributive, are significantly associated with life satisfaction in Europe. And we find that even controlling for many socio-demographic factors, individuals who view that justice is lacking or feel underpaid report lower life satisfaction. The institutional context seems to matter in what way? That fairness perceptions amplify or mitigate the effect of pay outcomes. The main caveats are that causality cannot be established, a reverse causality is possible. And the second caveat is that procedural justice by courts is only one facet of perceived fairness in society. What are the implications? That policies that enhance perceptions of fairness may contribute to well-being beyond income growth. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Can I ask a simple question?
Of course.
No, for your first round regressions, you showed us, right, that your fairness, whatever, goes from scale 0 to 10 or whatever. Rather than running straight overless regressions, is it possible that you could do some kind of an ordered probit or an ordered logit?
Yes,
Because,
I've done that. The results are the same.
oh, really?
Whether
Because
you
I
run
think that
ordered
gives you a little
logic.
bit more. Okay, sorry. The thing is, whenever we see the scaling going that way, I mean, what I mean, just to be on the safe side, rather than going from all the way from 0 to 10, I don't know. I'm just saying that maybe if we, rather than having that whatever 9 out of 10 classifications, whatever, maybe they can be consolidated into like maybe 4 or 5. So, you know what I mean in terms of.
Yes, I know, but then it becomes a bit arbitrary, and you have to find a different way to compress these across countries, and that it gets very complicated because there is an element of arbitrariness to how you do it in each country.
I mean, but anytime we run an ordinary least squares regression where you have a variable which is scaled on the left-hand side, we always have issues because I can make the scale change and then still, you know what I mean, all of a sudden the kind of results we are pulling may not be, you know what I mean? So my suggestion is you can have the least squares regression results, but also maybe you can have it in the appendix or whatever. Just trying to say that.
Sure, I can do that, and it's fairly easy. But this is a very long discussion, and there is also evidence in the literature that there's a lot of articles who have worked on this. And what the findings are that if the scale is so long, so to speak, so 11 points on the scale, it doesn't make a difference. And the interpretation of the coefficients is much easier. But yeah, that might not be a good argument. Nevertheless, this is what the literature does on life satisfaction.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Yeah. There's 2 questions. I don't know who is for first. Perhaps Agnes can use.
I think we'll let Milena goes first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, I'm with you on the ordered logit, ordered probit versus
Right.
OLS. There is a large body of literature that, yeah, pretty much this is settled now, and also these Bond and Lang critiques are, yeah, not a problem for life satisfaction. As you said, this is a long scale, so do it for the appendix, but I'm with you on that. So what I'm wondering is whether you have several variables on that measure different facets of this underlying concept, which is the procedural justice. So I wonder why you don't standardize them and then put them into some sort of a principal component index. And rotate use the rotation such that, each variable still contributes its unique, explanatory power, if you will, to the overall index. And that way it can be, much easier to interpret.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a very useful suggestion. I had not thought about it. What I have done is to repeat, perhaps I said that already. I repeated the results for all variables, and they are more or less the same in the sense that they go in the same direction. But you're right that it would use much more information if I did this. And by the way, if I may add here something that I forgot, is that I've correlated the gap, the wage gap variable that I've constructed with the subjective measure, and there is a strong correlation. So it seems that either the subjective measure is correct or that the gap is not wrong. Yeah. So the Klaus, perhaps now.
Yeah, so I have first a quick remark also on the methodology. I also agree with Milena that maybe nowadays the approximation used by OLS is shown to be fairly robust in terms of the conclusions we have. There might be circumstances where this is wrong, but very rare. At least my reading of the literature too. Also, I mean, in my early life, I was also a fan of doing complicated methods. Now, my question has more to do with the issue of courts. I mean, we as intellectuals, we of course completely understand the relevance of courts for societies, and across the world nowadays, we see how important courts could be or should be. But on the other hand, in real life, how many people have really personal experiences with courts? And the question is, how relevant is this really? I mean, I'm surprised that it's so relevant in your questions, and so on. So, I mean, yeah, do you have any kind of variables knowing what the experiences of people in your sample are with courts?
No, unfortunately, I don't. But my gut feeling is, and this I judge by my own personal belief. I have no dealings with courts, but I still, and so I have not a first-hand opinion of what courts are. But I have friends and relatives and colleagues who have had experiences with courts, and I read about it and about the courts in the newspapers, and I have an idea of how quickly justice is attributed, which is a very big element of how fair justice is. You know, if you're going to be given justice in 30 years' time, it's not justice. I mean, the reason I'm mentioning this is it because it's a fairly objective measure. Time is a fairly objective measure. It's not my view of my own assessment. But what worries me is that people might be affected by the other people's views, which are not necessarily impartial. That could be the case. But I do think it is very important, a very important element of thinking of how fair society is, because I want to know that if I get involved in a traffic accident, for example, then, and I have to go to court, then I want to know that there will be justice. That makes me feel less anxious. Even though so far I have not had this experience, but if I know there will be no justice, I perhaps will not drive at all, because I know that even if I get involved in a traffic accident where it's not my fault, I will not be given a fair treatment. So what I'm trying to say is that I think it does have an impact on people's lives, how they perceive of the justice system.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, hello again.
I
In
know.
the estimation, I'm still thinking about the effect of the unobservable factors which can affect the life satisfaction. For example, I'm thinking about mostly the life satisfaction is coming from the public services. Maybe if it's possible to create an indicator as a control for the public services. And another thing, you include the dummies for the countries. I think in this ESS survey, it does exist regional NUTS regions. So maybe it can be more, it can give more information. For example, if we are in the city center or if we are far from the city center, it can affect a lot the life satisfaction. Especially, I'm thinking about the heterogeneity within a country by region. So that was my concern. And also, I think what can be a really interesting, as you did all your estimation at intensive margin, because all are employed. The idea um, maybe unemployed people, they are less satisfied in a general. Maybe they leave their job or they are desperate, this kind of effects.
Yeah. Okay. So let me start from the last question. As I mentioned, there is a column here which you cannot see, where the whole population is being used, and there you still find this impact of the impartiality of courts on life satisfaction. But as the discussion before with Milena, I do agree with you that there is some disconnect here between the two. Now, regarding the other points you raised, which are very useful, I think I should control for the quality of public services as the public perceives them. And it could be that when you have a negative view of justice, you have a negative view of all other public services being provided. So that will show if this is more, if the court's variable is more and above these. And now regarding the dissatisfaction of living in a town, I think I might have used urbanization. I can't remember very well now. But yeah, I could go ahead and see if we can gain any more
For example,
standardization by using NUTS regions. Yeah.
rate of, I think there exists a data for the rate of urbanization. We used it for the France, and yeah, it was defined. Normally, I'm working on the satisfied with the public services. That's why I was thinking directly about the public services.
Yeah, this is very useful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if I may, I also have a couple of points. So so going back to this point that Klaus raised and earlier, I think Noor as well, about how likely is it that people come into contact with justice system. Maybe so there are certain events in life that typically lead to some contact with judiciary system, and I think divorce is quite common in all those countries. Especially if children are involved, then perhaps you could see whether there's any heterogeneity based on marital status or presence of children and marital status. Maybe there is also some data on length of proceedings in different countries. That sort of goes back to the point that you were mentioning earlier. There could be some proxy for how well justice systems operate. Especially for maybe civil cases, because those are the cases that I think you have in mind when you think about how people perceive how fairly they will be treated if they have an issue, right? Another thing, but I don't know if you have the data that will allow you to do it, you could look for some information on, sort of cases that were present in the media in around the time in different countries or different regions, because that can sort of prompt people thinking about the justice system in general and whether it's fair or not, or tilt their opinions. And I think my last point was it would be nice to explore more heterogeneity of this result, and especially I was interested in this wage gap. So I would like to see the results of the Mincer equation when you estimate the wage, and how that looks like, and also see whether this result differs by education, place of residence, etc. And last thing, I think there is some literature that talks about the difference in how different cultures perceive justice systems in general, and some sort of cultural component into the trust. Maybe you can look at the some heterogeneity by ethnicity or race. I don't recall what exactly is the data in this data set, but maybe that could also shed some more light on the mechanisms.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This is very useful. This is all very useful. If I may answer to something, I would answer to the Mincer regression. I didn't prepare a slide with the results. It's too much information. But now the education is already in taking into account and predicting the wage you should have. You are suggesting that the gap might still differ by the level of education.
Yeah, so how that gap affects the relationship between life satisfaction and fairness. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I don't want to. Yeah, this is very useful. I don't want to argue that life satisfaction depends only on justice, but it does seem to me that fairness and justice are very important. And I know fairness and justice are not the same. And there's a point in one of these legal documents that I read that says, somebody was arrested, and the judge asked the person, "Do you think it was just unfair that you were arrested?" And they said, "Well, it was unjust, but it was fair because everybody was treated in the same way." So it's not entirely the same, but it's very difficult to get exactly to the point of justice or the point of fairness.
Okay, do we have other questions?
Oh, so maybe just one suggestion. Well, I wish my PhD student was here because he works on that. But there are questions on justice and fairness in the Life and Transition survey. So they ask, and there might be in some others, they ask questions about, okay, do you think that success in life is due to lack in connections or to own effort? And there are some other questions in that kind of spirit. So that might be another.
I'll look into that. Yeah, thanks, Milena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you can reach out to. I will put down his email.
Yes, that would be great if you could.
For you.
Okay, do we have any other comments, suggestions, questions? We still have 6 minutes. Well, if not, then I think I would like to thank Daphne for a very interesting presentation and everyone else for active participation. I will stop the recording now. If I figure out how to do that without closing the meeting.